Welcome to In-House Counsel and HR Perspectives, where business leaders discuss the collaboration between in-house legal teams, human resources professionals, and the communities they serve. Now let's get started.
Hello and welcome to In-House Counsel and HR Perspectives. I'm your host, David Hall, Chief Administrative Officer at Hall Benefits Law. This podcast is dedicated to exploring how in-house legal and corporate leaders work together to drive compliance, innovation, and business success. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Hall Benefits Law, where we help businesses maximize the value of their employee benefit plans while minimizing legal risk. We're proud to support these important conversations. Today, I am honored to welcome Mark Beatty, Senior Vice President of Global Total Rewards at Paramount. Yes, that Paramount. Mark brings over 15 years of experience designing and scaling compensation, benefits, and executive pay programs for global organizations. His expertise spans executive compensation, global benefits strategy, M&A integration, and regulatory compliance. At Paramount, he leads total rewards initiatives that are aligned with business goals and built to support a modern and inclusive workforce. We'll be getting to know Mark a bit and discussing how organizations can design strategic total rewards programs that drive performance, attract and retain top talent, and stay ahead of a shifting regulatory landscape. Mark, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. Mark, you and I shared a meal together in Texas a few months ago. I believe it was Texas, where we were both enjoying some meetings, and I really enjoyed talking about how you travel back and forth from New York to Georgia, which is my hometown, and it's really a fascinating role that you play at Paramount, and the way that you perform your role there is unique as well. Tell our audience a little bit about your professional journey. What led you to your current role at Paramount?
So I started off as an attorney. I was a tax attorney, got my JD and then an LLM in tax from the University of Florida. I started off in like most people do, large law firm, and I was actually focused more on benefits compliance. And then that's when Enron and WorldCom and all of that kind of struck, and it was tough for the economy. It was tough for law firms, and for whatever reason, it started kind of a shift in terms of my work towards more out of the benefits, GUST and EBTRA amendments, and just compliance with the retirement plans and cafeteria plans. It really started a move towards more corporate governance and executive comp. And then I just kind of really enjoyed that, and so that became, it just kind of snowballed and got to where that became the bulk of what I was doing. And that eventually led me across the country and back to New York, where I was at Sherman and Sterling. And then, I always kind of liked the idea of going in-house and having one client to represent and really understanding it and being able to influence policy and things like that. And that kind of always appealed to me. And so I went in-house to CBS Corporation, and I was the exec comp counsel there. And I was in that role for 5 years and just basically did everything that you would think an exec comp counsel would do. And then I really worked closely with the head of total rewards, different title, but essentially that was the job at CBS Corporation at that time, and really enjoyed the interaction, really enjoyed the partnership. And when an opportunity came to jump to HR, I said, oh, I really want to do that. And so I kind of, when an opening came up, I threw my hat in the ring to do that. And, I started doing that and did that for a number of years. And over time, I just kind of drew upon that experience I had as the benefits lawyer and compliance person to provide oversight of various benefits projects until eventually I got the big job as the head of total rewards at the CBS Viacom merger, which is now Paramount. So long and winding road, but kind of always around those edges anyway.
That's a great segue to my next question, Mark, which is, were there any pivotal career moments, and it sounds like there may have been some there at CBS, or mentors even, that had a lasting impact on not only your philosophy around how you do compensation, for example, but on your leadership style or other aspects of what you do in your role?
Absolutely. I've always thought that there's a metaphor I always tell people when they leave the role, which is you kind of always, you pack up all the great stuff you've learned, you put that in one suitcase, and you pack up the other things that you said, oh, I wish I could have that back. You put that in the other suitcase. And the great thing is you get to leave that bad suitcase in your old office, and you only take the good stuff with you. And so I think you learn amazing things, and critically, the learning and the development really comes from learning what not to do again, as opposed to really what, you have way more failures than successes, particularly earlier in your career. And so if you can really learn from those and internalize them and just create like a 2.0, a 3.0, a better version of yourself every step you move, I think that's the key to always having that, that criticality of yourself and what do you need to be a better lawyer, a better executive, a better what have you. And I've always tried to follow that. And so, yeah, I'd say every one of these moves in my career, there was something I took away from it. Certainly mentors along the way. Can I mention them by name or?
Absolutely, I hope you will.
So I worked with I worked with a great guy in one stop in Jacksonville, Florida. My first big job. A guy named Dom Bazzetti. He's a partner in New York. Great guy, and the thing I really learned from him was like, one, he's just an insatiable work ethic. And he had this great piece of advice, which is kind of like everything that leaves your office has your professional brand on it, your reputation. And so if you really think about that and how you build that brand, that's really critical, because that's how you build trust with clients, with other attorneys, with business executives, what have you. And I thought, man, that's a great piece of advice. And then I worked in Seattle, and I worked for a partner there by the name of Melanie Curtis, and she was great. And what I really appreciated, and the lesson I really took from her is, you can't not let people fail. And she kind of threw me in there into the fire a little bit with a client, and I candidly, I didn't do as great of a job as I probably should have, and I learned a lot from that, and about how to communicate better and how to be more proactive instead of reactive with client communications and things like that. And so, I'll never be able to repay, her like, oh man, I really appreciated the fact that she let me learn and be willing to let me have that experience, because I gained so much from it. And then in New York at CBS, I worked with who was the head of Total Rewards. Again, a different title, but his name was Steve Moranti, and I just really learned a lot from Steve. Just really tried to sponge a lot from him on how he approaches situation, how he deals with executives, how he deals with, the board, how he builds a team and inspires a team. And I just really took a lot of that to heart. And my leadership style is a little different, but again, I'm trying to take the best parts from every person I've worked with that was meaningful in my life, and then I try to use that going forward. So I had some great mentors along the way, for sure.
I love that, and I especially like what you said about looking at your career, or even as at your person, right, as a different version than what you were in the past, right? And we frequently talk about HBL in a very similar manner. This is HBL 3.0 or 4.0. We're a very different organization with similar goals to what we had in 2013, right? But we're doing things differently and hopefully better, and focusing on getting better every day. And so that analogy of a computer software, right? And it's still there to hopefully achieve the same purpose for the end user, but in such a way that's better than it was before. I really like that analogy, Mark. I'm glad you shared that. Let me ask you a little bit about your individual role at Paramount. Sure. As the SVP of Global Total Rewards, what are your primary responsibilities? How do those that you work with, what do they see you doing on a day-to-day basis, and how do you look at your role?
So I would say I think the easiest way to describe it is I basically have, when I tell people that aren't Total Rewards or HR professionals, oh, I'm head of Total Rewards, They have no idea what that means. So what I basically describe it is it's everything in your paycheck that's not that is not your base salary. Well, even that, it is basically take out all the payroll taxes, all the other deductions. My department oversees that. Payroll processes it, but we're the programs that all those deductions are for. That's kind of what I do. That's kind of what I tell people outside. What it really means, to the HR community is it's I have oversight over pay, benefits, stock plan, compensation, and benefits. Pay is obviously executive comp. It's short-term incentives. It's cash incentives. So there's cash compensation. There's benefits, which is everything from wellness, the smallest wellness benefit, to something that's kind of a core benefit like a medical. It also includes stock plan for executives that are eligible for the equity program. It's the stock plan administration. And then there's some other odd aspects at Paramount that are kind of unique to Paramount and its structure, which is I also have oversight of this almost like a finance team. Some accountants that basically do all of the accounting expense calculations for both our pension, our OPEB, and our stock plan, and how that hits the financials. So that's kind of a unique one that is basically part of an inherited structure that I got when I got the top job at Paramount.
So, Mark, I don't think I prepped you for this particular question, but to give the listeners of the podcast some idea of how many people you're actually responsible for relative to total rewards, tell us a little bit about Paramount as an organization. How many employees are you, looking after, if you will, as the head of total rewards?
So it's a little tricky. We're in a unique industry where we have a lot of employees that are employees in the traditional sense, and then we have some project-based employees, and then we have employees that are work on like Paramount Productions but are payrolled on a third-party payroll company.
Okay.
And most of those receive benefits from that third-party payroll company. So for the most part, I would say it's probably about 15 to 20,000. It just kind of fluctuates. Is about the size of the employee population where, there's traditional pay and benefits over, for which I provide the oversight.
And in an organization of that size, obviously Total Rewards is just one group. I'm interested if you could share, because part of the purpose of this podcast is to help other professionals who may be in a role like yours or aspire to be in a role like yours understand what it means to collaborate with others in different roles. So often when we work with plan sponsors, we form the bridge between HR and legal, or we form the bridge between finance and legal, or finance and HR, because each of those has an important function, and what we do impacts those different departments in certain ways, right? So could you just tell me a little bit about what collaboration looks like across legal, HR, and other executive leadership teams within your organization?
For sure. Well, let's first start with finance, because obviously total rewards is a cost, particularly on the compensatory side, right? For base pay, you have base pay, and then you have the annual raise process or the annual merit increase process. That has to be budgeted because it's a fairly large number at most companies. And if you add 3 to 4% for an annual raise on there, it gets larger every year, and it builds and it cascades. So there's a budgetary process that we go through. And there's the forecasting process where throughout the year we're forecasting how we're doing on our short-term bonus plan, our annual cash plan. How are we doing? Because you have to raise your accrual up or down based on how you're. So there's a nonstop collaboration with finance, because ultimately these are fairly expensive programs, and that have to be accounted for and budgeted for and accrued for, so that there is no surprises, at earnings time. That's the finance side. On the legal side, legally compliant programs are, for me, those are table stakes. Now, I think that's the case for all HR professionals, but certainly those that have come from a ERISA legal background, that's something that has to be there. So we're nonstop collaborating with the lawyers at Paramount that kind of where my team is their client. And it's really, it's everything from reviewing our vendor contracts, letting us know where we have opportunities to improve on things like indemnification, termination for convenience. It's all of those key provisions that go into those. What are our opportunities to improve? It's everything from making sure that we're compliant with new regulatory and getting regular updates from them on regulatory happenings and new legislation or potential legislation, and what are some tactics that we could use in order to comply or to be ready to comply, and what kind of costs that we need to look at, those kind of things. So we're constantly having those conversations. And then on the HR side, a big piece of total rewards, whether some people think it's a three-legged stool, some people think it's a four-legged stool. I go more towards the four-legged stool. I think there's like the health, and then I think there's the wealth, and then I think there's more like the wellness, right? And then I think the fourth leg of the stool is really that growth and that career growth and career development and career learning piece. And that is owned by another, group inside of our HR department, which is our organizational development department. So we partnering them particularly on employee communications, the performance management process, and how that ties into the annual merit increases, the cash bonus plans that are all performance-based pay. So we tie that in as to the performance management, and of course that's really that performance management process is run by the organizational development team. We also work very closely, obviously, with the TA team, the talent acquisition team, because we have to make sure that our new hire packages are compelling, but also that when people come in, they really understand our benefits and the power of our benefits package. Because we believe that our benefits package is really differentiates. We have a really robust benefits package. It's our philosophy, and we believe it's a powerful benefits package. It's a compelling benefits package, and it's a very retentive benefits package. And we want to make sure that's communicated and utilized and understood by incoming new hires. We work very closely with that team as well. So hopefully that's not too long-winded, but it's a lot of collaboration that works in order for the team to really produce the right result, which is having a really engaged, highly motivated, and retained workforce.
That's not too long-winded at all. And as a matter of fact, it makes me think of something our founding partner said many years ago, which is that these benefits programs that organizations put in place, that when they're compliant and well designed, they can be the foundation for a business's growth and future success. And so it sounds like Paramount puts a lot of stock in that. And the fact that you have an organizational development team in place, it sounds like to me, and I've never worked at or for Paramount, but it sounds like Paramount has a fairly defined culture and mission. And I'd like to ask you, Mark, to whatever extent you're comfortable answering, how does Paramount's culture and mission influence the way you approach your strategy of the total reward strategy?
Yeah, sure. And our marketing people I may not have this exactly right, but the Paramount mission, if you go to like the Paramount website, it's like we create content for everyone. We have everything from like more edgy kind of coastal shows like you would have on Showtime, like a Dexter or something. But then we also have like Yellowstone. We have content for everybody. We have Jersey Shore, we have SpongeBob, we have Top Gun. We have content for everyone. And so the way I always think about it is it's everyone's invited, everyone can participate, and for me, and so we're entertaining everybody. It's mass entertainment, and to me, the way I think about that is our benefits and our programs have to also engage and motivate and retain all employees. So it's that inclusiveness. It has to be something that works for everyone. And I view benefits as kind of like the table stakes. You cannot do your job if you're constantly worried about health coverage, things like that. And so to me, that is really critical. And so we always differentiate on the wellness concept, which is That's kind of our strategy. We differentiate on wellness. We have market leading, benefit plans. And that's everything from wellness to our medical plans to all various plugins. Well, I call them plugins, but it's basically programs that we have through third-party partnerships that work with our medical plan or work with or special programs or different wellness initiatives, on-lot cancer screenings, you name it. We're there. If there's a need, we meet it. And so that's really part of our strategy, and that is what really differentiates us. And so I think that's kind of where I would put that.
No, that's great, and you did a nice job of tying together the Paramount mission with okay, now what does that mean when I'm sitting in this seat doing my job, right?
Yeah.
Related, and we don't have to go into as much detail on this, but relative to your role, can you tell me a little bit about how you balance these different aspects of your job? So things like legal compliance, competitive positioning, making sure that the benefits you're offering are attractive and retentive, and then employee experience. Do you rank those somehow? Do you have a number one that you really lean into and the others serve it, or is it some different philosophy that I'm not picking up on?
Well, for me, the legal compliance is kind of the table stakes.
Okay.
That has to be. You can't have programs that are not compliant. So that for me is like what I would call bedrock foundation,
Okay.
right? On top of that, it's a pull and a tug, right? So, and they kind of serve two purposes. For me, the competitiveness is about reaching future employees and retaining current employees. If your benefit programs are not competitive, you're going to have difficulty hiring the best employees, and you're going to have difficulty keeping your best employees. And in terms of how we manage that, well, there's a various benchmarking studies and things that you look at. We all belong to various trade organizations where you have access to what is market for this particular benefit, or and so you get a sense of and then obviously you look at your peer companies there. What is so-and-so doing? What are they doing? And so you're constantly evolving and checking in and making sure that you're providing competitive programs. The other piece is the employee experience. That is critical because that lines to utilization. If your employees don't know what your benefits are or how to access them or how to utilize them, you're going to see low utilization rates, which means you're basically just burning money because programs cost money. And if people don't use it, most of the programs are things that are actually helpful. I mean, they improve health. And, I'm not the right person to speak about it, but I think everybody knows sick employees are not as productive, and less productive workforce means a company makes less money, right? That's kind of basic. So if you don't utilize the benefits, you tend to have a sicker workforce, you have a less productive workforce. It's also a waste of money because as an employer, you're pouring money into these programs. You want them to be utilized. You want the healthiest, happiest, most engaged workforce possible. And we do a lot in the experience range. We do, health fairs. And for certain offices, we do virtual health cares. We actually have like a 3D system where you can go in and go to a virtual health fair and click on a door and it opens up and you kind of walk in their room. And so we do a lot of things to make sure that we're engaging our employees and making sure that they understand their benefits, both what they are and how to access them.
Wow, I have about 5 follow-up questions. We don't have time to go into any of them, unfortunately, but I love what you said about reaching those future employees and keeping the good ones you've got, right? I think that's a really nice way to think about if you're being successful in your role, then you're seeing that happen.
Yeah.
One of the questions I had already prepared has to do with Paramount's workforce. Obviously you've got a lot of creative people at Paramount, and then you've got your more corporate workforce. Do you have to consider those dynamics specifically when you design global total rewards programs for this workforce, or do you think of it more as rising tide lifts all boats? Are you customizing things for certain groups? Tell me a little bit about your approach in an organization like Paramount, where you've got a very clear creative focus and a very clear corporate focus.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's honestly it's a question I think about often, and I think about it every year when I think about what our strategy and kind of what is our big playbook for this upcoming year. I think about that because we pivoted to streaming pretty hard early on in the this decade, 2020, 2021. And so, are you a media company with a streaming arm, or are you a streaming company with a legacy media arm? Because the answers are two very different things, right?
Yes.
And when I say streaming, I really mean like the tech. Are you a tech company with media, or are you a media company with some tech? And so that's constantly something that you're evaluating because, various industries that are less diverse, various companies that are more clearly in one bucket or the other
Yes.
have very different pay mixes. And the way I think about it is more pay mix. I think benefits for the most part are fairly kind of one size fits all. You can play around the edges, but for the most part, benefits are benefits. You're not going to say, well, these employees get this kind of a medical plan, but these don't. Well, people get sick, they need coverage, right? So benefits tend to be there. You obviously can offer some like perky, like fringe type benefits maybe that, for example, in the tech space, you have more like a workplace type fringes. Could you do something like that? Sure, but that's what I mean more around the edges. At its core though, benefits are basically the same. The real opportunity, the thing that I think about a lot is pay mix, because if you compensation professionals will say, in tech they have high equity as a percentage of their total pay. If you think about total target direct compensation, which is base bonus and equity is a much larger percentage than it is in traditional like creative media, where it's a smaller percentage. And so, there's always that pull and tug. So yeah, to the extent if we do anything that's somewhat customized, it tends to be more in the equity range, because that's real in the pay mix, because that's where you really have to be competitive. You cannot, if you're competing against like tech companies, you're going to have to provide an offer that is compelling to someone who's being recruited by tech companies.
Yes.
And tech people aren't paid the way accountants are paid. They're just not. So do you radically change everything? No, you don't. But do you make some finer tweaks so that you're more competitive? Absolutely. And to me, that's just more, it's not really having a different strategy. It's just being very flexible as needed so that you can recruit and retain the talent that you need in order to succeed.
Wow, what a thorough answer. Thank you, Mark. Two more questions before we wrap things up
Sure.
today. I'm interested, as a former benefits attorney, Mark, your approach to things like vendor renewals, right? Our RFPs, specifically in the context, I'll use an example of what we're doing for plan sponsors, right? When we negotiate a TPA contract or we negotiate a PBM contract on behalf of a plan sponsor, we have a certain approach, right? When you approach vendor renewals, what is your approach, and how has your experience as a benefits attorney impacted, I think, number one, your ability to be effective in doing so, and just number two, your overall approach?
Yeah, I think drawing upon my experience as a benefits attorney, I just know that like there's a lot of flexibility. I've over time I've seen that vendors are flexible when they need to be flexible, and they tend to be more inflexible or not flexible when they don't have to be. So there's a leverage component there, and so I always kind of keep that in mind. Like if they really want the business, they'll figure out a way to get it done, particularly on a non-economic term. So for me, those are highly negotiable. I always draw upon that, and I always keep that in the back of my head. But I guess when I really think about vendor relationships and renewals, and if I want to re-up or if I don't, if I want to go to full RFP, if I don't want to do that, the first thing I always come to is the relationship. How good of a partner have they been? And I try to be fair. And the first thing I do is I go and I gather like the people on my team that are the day-to-day subject matter experts. If it's a retirement vendor, I get my head of retirement. If it's a benefits vendor, I get my head of benefits. And we just have a real straight shooter conversation. How are they as a partner? How do they, do they show up? Do they come to bat? Do they bring the big stick when we need them? Like, can you rely on them? Are they, what kind of service are they getting? What are the call center? Like, how are the stats? All of that. And I really try to get a feel for how they're doing. Because as we all know, the grass isn't always greener, right? So I really want to understand how that vendor's doing. And then I have that, and then that gives me a sense of how much, that helps me influence the economics. There's always, as a fiduciary for various plans, there's always this mindset of you trying to do what's in the best interest for the plan participants and beneficiaries. And if there's an opportunity to lower cost based on what other similarly situated employers are paying this vendor, then I want to reap those savings as well. And so we always engage third-party consultants who have a knowledge of not only the market, but what current deals that have been done. So we have that market intelligence about what is our goal going into it, for what are we looking to save going into this based on what we think we should be able to get from the market. And then we balance that with the vendor relationship to make sure we land at a place that gets us the savings and creates a fair result so that we keep having that vendor in a good position and providing good service to us and not looking to leave us as well, because that's the other thing. Vendors can choose to leave clients as well as clients can choose to leave vendors, and that's an important consideration. So that's kind of my approach. And then my goal is I tend to look at the non-economic terms, right? And I watch those closely. Most people work on the economics and they don't care about the non-economic terms. I hone in on the non-economic terms, and I'm laser focused on those, because that is something that you can really undermine a really good deal if you have, poor terms, like really low indemnifications, not a lot of coverage for like data issues or privacy leaks. You want to really have those good non-economic terms to really solidify the deal, because I think, you could really be doing your plan participants and beneficiaries a disservice if you're not laser focused on the non-economic terms. So that's kind of my approach. Sorry, it's a little around the edges there, but I think it's always important to vendor relationship first, and really say how you feel, and then you go into it and you kind of say, okay, now putting that aside, if I had amnesia, how would I approach this deal?
Well, you may have noticed me madly scribbling. Your answer was not only interesting, but instructive and helpful for someone who serves as a third-party vendor to many different plan sponsors. So I appreciate your taking time to flesh that out for us, and that is one of the purposes of this podcast, is to help. Again, let's build bridges across the plan sponsor landscape. So just to wrap things up today, Mark, this has been a very, again, instructive and interesting conversation with you. And I think the listeners hear what I hear, which is a real enthusiasm for what you do. I was going to ask you, how do you stay motivated? But I think I'll ask that a little bit different way. Mm-hmm. What motivates you and inspires you in a field that is constantly evolving with these legal, financial, and cultural pressures, some of which we've talked about today? What motivates and inspires you, Mark, in your role as SVP of Total Rewards?
Probably I'll go back to a personal anecdote. My father was fairly mistreated towards kind of the end of his career when he was exited from a company. And it always kind of stuck with me. So the thing that motivates me more than anything else is I just want to make sure that the benefits that we're providing are taking care of people and their families and are allowing them the opportunity. You can't guarantee a result, but the opportunity for them to put money away for retirement, for that rainy day, and then making sure that we handle people with grace. And to the extent people retire or they leave or they're exited, however, making sure that we're handling them with white gloves as much as we can. And so that's a real focus for me and my team, is really kind of looking after. We take great pride in just kind of being stewards of our plans and our benefit programs for our current employees and our former employees. And so that's something that is always motivating to me, is like how would I want to be treated if I was no longer at this company? Who would I want? How would I want my benefits looked after? So that's always personally motivating to me. And then in general, like everybody else, I'm obsessed with everything that's going on and the opportunities to leverage generative AI to kind of take out repetitive tasks. And I'm really looking at it with a focus on how can we, communicate even more about our programs. Just really be out there with really just using generative AI to create content that we can put out on our employee pages to make our programs even more known and just really drive utilization using a tool like generative AI to really drive utilization, which will improve health results and improve productivity. So that's one of the things I'm really jazzed about right now, is learning everything I can about how to do that, how to scale it, and how to make it where it's something that my department can use so that we can really start pushing that. I know that there's going to be amazing things that can be done down the line, but everybody's got to start somewhere, and so that's one of the things I'm really focused on right now.
Well, I personally think that's awesome. Just my personal perspective, getting to know you a little bit, both when we shared that meal together a couple of months ago, as well as in our conversation today. Paramount is a very large organization, right? But I think people unfortunately forget that large organizations are just that. They're organized groups of people, right? And at the end of the day, when you lose focus on the people, you can lose your inspiration. So hearing that you are inspired and motivated by a desire to ensure that certain things either don't happen, that maybe happened in your own family, or that can influence a family in a positive way, or even this idea that you can lean into technology that will then allow you to do something even better, to me is just a reminder that there are individuals at the top levels of large organizations who are trying to do the right thing. And again, from my perspective, Mark, I'm going to be quiet here in a minute, and we're going to take off and thank you for your time. But it's been a fascinating and an informative discussion. I do thank you for sharing your experience and expertise in leading global total rewards at Paramount. Your insights into executive compensation, regulatory alignment, strategic workforce planning, these are invaluable to our audience, and that's why we do this podcast. So as we exit today, I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hall Benefits Law, where we're dedicated to helping businesses maximize the value of employee benefit plans while minimizing legal risks. Mark, thank you for being here today. Please be sure to join us next time, listeners, for another in-depth conversation with a leader shaping the future of HR and compliance. To our listeners, keep leading with purpose and aligning your strategy with your people. Thanks for tuning in to In-House Counsel and HR Perspectives. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, Mark.